This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, ma, I'm starting the class. Today's my class is physiology of menstrual cycle. Okay. Okay, what is menstruation? It is visible manifestation of cyclical, pathological, uterine bleeding due to shedding of the endometrium following invisible interplay of the what hormones? Ovarian hormones, pituitary hormones, and hypothalamic hormones, which forms the hypothalamo-pituitary ovarian axis. So all these hormones from the level of hypothalamus, pituitary to ovary will have an interplay and they will have an effect on the endometrium, which causes cyclical, pathological, physiological uterine bleeding. That is your menstruation. So for this menstruation to occur, the axis should be properly coordinated. All the at the level of hypothalamus, at the level of the pituitary, and at the level of the ovary, there should be a coordinated interplay of the hormones. And these hormones should have an effect on the endometrium also. So, and the outflow tract, anatomically, the outflow tract should be patent for the menstruation to occur. If there is a transverse vaginal septum or if there is an imperforate hymen, even though the hormones are normal, you will not see menstruation. It will go into cryptomenoria. So we will discuss about the hormonal control first. This is the hormonal control, the hypothalamus pituitary ovarian axis. What does the hypothalamus produce? The hypothalamus produces GnRH. GnRH is gonadotropin releasing hormone. This GnRH in turn acts on the anterior pituitary with the positive feedback loop of the GnRH, stimulation of the GnRH, the anterior pituitary gland will produce LH and FSH. What is LH? It is luteinizing hormone. What is FSH? It is follicular stimulating hormone. These two hormones come down and act on the ovaries. In the ovary, there is primordial follicle which will be developing into oocyte, primary oocyte and secondary oocyte. So this LH and FSH helps in the development of the secondary oocyte or Graafian follicle from the primordial follicle, which in turn will result in ovulation. So prior to the ovulation, what is the main hormone released by the ovary? It is estrogen. After the ovulation, what happens? What is the prime hormone produced by the ovary? It is the progesterone. So before ovulation, it is estrogen. After ovulation, it is progesterone. So this is the axis. And again, this estrogen and progesterone will have positive feedback and negative feedback effect on both anterior pituitary and hypothalamus, regulating how much stimulating hormones like GnRH, LH, and FSH should be produced in the body. This is the hormonal control. So what happens in the fetal life? Active HPO axis will be there, and it is functional from 20 weeks gestational age. And development of the ovarian follicles depends upon the gonadotropins released from the fetal pituitary. What happens in the infancy and childhood? The level of hormones will be minimal up to 2 years. FSH is highly sensitive to exogenous estrogen. So if you give exogenous estrogen, the FSH will decrease. What happens in the pre-puberty and puberty? Prior to the puberty, what happens? Hypothalamus becomes very sensitive to the negative feedback by each small amount of extragonadal steroids. So GnRH and LH-FSH are not produced in pre-puberty period because they are very sensitive to the negative feedback effect. Once the puberty is approached, what happens? The hypothalamic center becomes more sensitive to positive feedback by the ovarian steroids. So they'll go into positive feedback. So what happens? The GnRH will cause pulsatile release, which in turn affects in the increasing gonadal secretions, LH more than FSH, which in turn increase the ovarian stimulation, which means by ovarian stimulation, you will have increased levels of estrogen levels, which leads to telarchy, and there will be again due to the feedback effect, there will be tonic and pulsatile release of gonadal. With the increase of estrogen levels, there is telarchy. What is telarchy? Telarchy is nothing other than breast development. So, with increasing estrogen levels, the female child will have breast development. That is one of the secondary sexual characters. So, what happens in perimenopausal period? We have discussed about the pubertal period. What happens in the perimenopausal period? the number of the follicles remaining in the woman will continuously decline with age. So ovarian follicles, and that is one thing, number of follicles will decrease. And the other thing is the ovarian follicles become gradually resistant to the FSH and LH produced by the pituitary, which leads to impaired folliculogenesis. So if there is no follicle generated, if there is no secondary oocyte or Graafian follicle generated, there will be no ovulation, there will be no estrogen production, and there will be no progesterone production. So there is less estrogen secreted and decrease in the feedback effect on the HPO axis. Less estrogen means increase in the FSH, right? Because of the negative. With menopause, estradiol levels fall down and cannot have negative feedback. So GnRH release is enhanced. Increased synthesis and release of the gonadotropins. Gradually, with senescence, GnRH secretion is diminished, and also gonadotropins and estrogen when menopause sets in. So, with negative feedback effect, there will be increase in GnRH release. But because of the senescence, there will be, even though GnRH is increased, there will be diminished production of FSH and LH. So GnRH, where is it produced? It is produced in the arcuate nucleus of the hypothalamus in pulsatile fashion into the portal circulation. It is portal circulation. Through the portal circulation, the GnRH is released into the anterior pituitary, and the frequency and amplitude of this pulse secretion will be different in different phases of the menstrual cycle. Okay. If there is, instead of pulsatile secretion, if there is continuous exposure of GnRH, what will happen? The anterior pituitary sensitivity to this to the GnRH decreases. This we call it as down regulation. So for a functional pituitary to work properly, the GnRH should be produced in a pulsatile manner. If there is continuous production of GnRH, the sensitivity of the GnRH of its effect on anterior pituitary decreases. This is called down regulation. So this continuous exposure, when will occur? If you give GnRH externally continuously. On contrary, if there is intermittent exposure of the GnRH to the gonadotropins, there is increased receptor sensitivity. This is called upregulation. So downregulation and upregulation. Okay. Now we'll come to gonadotropins. What are the main gonadotropins? Those are LH and FSH. Where are they produced? They are produced from the beta cells in the anterior pituitary. So FSH. What are the main functions or what are the major effects of FSH? It rescues the follicles from apoptosis. It stimulates follicular vessels, antral follicle. It stimulates the formation of the antral follicles, and it helps in maturation of the Graafian follicle. So these are the anatomical effects. What are the biochemical effects of the FSH, follicular stimulating hormone? It synthesizes its own receptors on the granulosa cells. It synthesizes LH receptors on both theca cells and granulosa cells, and it induces aromatization, that is conversion of androgens to estrogens in granulosa cells, and it stimulates the production of activin and inhibin from the granulosa cells. These are the main functions of biochemical effects of FSH on the follicle, whatever the follicle. So it synthesizes its own receptors. It will help in the synthesis of the receptors of the LH in both theca cells and granulosa cells, and it helps in the conversion of the androgens to the estrogens, and it helps in the production of activin and inhibin. These are all the effects of FSH on the ovary. So how is the peak? When does the FSH peak? What is the curve of levels of FSH throughout the menstrual cycle? What happens to the FSH during the menstrual cycle. FSH rises soon after the onset of menstruation and attains peaks at day 1 of the day 12 of the cycle, and it will gradually decline to the base level at about 80, day 80. And LH is almost static throughout the cycle except one peak. LH will have a peak at about 12 hours before ovulation. We call it as LH surge. So what are the effects of LH? What are the biochemical effects? What are the morphological effects? LH causes its own activation in the theca cells, which stimulate androgen production, and this androgen is diffused into the granulosa cells, and they produce and they are converted into estrogens. And after the utilization of the granulosa cells, it will help in the production of progesterone. What are the morphological effects? It stimulates resumption of the meiosis and with extrusion of the first polar body. What happens in the fetal life? In fetal life, the primordial oocyte or in the arrest of first meiotic prophase. It will be arrested in the prophase of the first meiotic cycle. So during puberty, with the resumption of the menstruation or menstrual cycle, what will happen? This LH will induce the meiosis, which has stopped at the infancy stage. It will induce the meiosis to continue the first stage with the extrusion of the first polar. And it helps in the physical act of ovulation, and it helps in the formation and maintenance of the conception. These are the effects of the LH. So, as I said previously, how does the endometrium, LH, FS, ovary, estrogen, and progesterone happen throughout the cycle from day 0 to day 28. So, thickness of the endometrium before ovulation. This is the point of ovulation. Before ovulation, it will be in proliferative phase. After ovulation, it will be in secretory phase. The ovulation phase is a little thinner, and in the secretory phase, gradually the endometrium thickens. And this is ovarian cycle. Before ovulation, this is a mature Graafian follicle. Then here the ovulation occurs. After ovulation, it becomes carpus albicans. This is carpus albicans. So what happens to the LH? Just before the ovulation, there is a peak in the LH. 12 hours before the ovulation, there is a peak of LH, and it is almost baseline throughout the cycle. What happens to the estrogen? Estrogen peaks during the proliferative phase of the endometrium, and progesterone peaks during the secretory phase of the endometrium. Okay. So estrogen again. What is the site of production? It is predominantly produced by the granulosa cells of the follicles, and after utilization from the corpus luteum. Small quantity from the theca cells and ovarian stroma. What is the mechanism of the hormone production? When we call it as two cell, two gonadotropin concept. So what happens here during ovarian steroidogenesis? There are two cells. One is granulosa cell, the other one is theca cells. So they are under the influence of two gonadotropins. What are those two gonadotropins? One is LH, the other is FSH. So this is the theca interna. So this is theca cells. This is the granulosa cells. And the theca cells, the LH hormones will have an effect. It converts the cholesterol into androgens. What are the androgens here? Androstenedione and testosterone are the two androgens. These are produced by the theca cells under the influence of LH. And these androgens will be percolating into the adjacent granulosa cells. Here, the FSH will convert these androgens into estrogens. What are the estrogens? This estrone and estradiol. These are the estrogens. So, this is two cell and two gonadotropin theory. So what are the actions of these hormones on the uterus? So during there will be increased vascularity with hyperplasia of the muscles in the uterus, and there will be cyclical change in the endometrium, which includes regeneration and proliferation of the endometrium and produces receptors for estrogen. What happens on the cervix? There will be hypertrophy of the cervix and increase in the cervical gland secretion. And secretions are watery, alkaline with less protein and more electrolytes, which favor in sperm penetration. What happens on the ovary? The presence of the estrogen and FSH in antral fluid is essential for the proliferation of the granulosa cells and continued follicular growth. And then what are the actions of the progesterone at the site of secretion? It is luteinization of the theca cells to form the corpus luteum. And what are the physiological actions on the uterus? It is myohyperplasia and diminishing contractility of the myometrium. And there is increase in the tone of the circular muscle fibers at the isthmus, and secretory activity in the endometrium enhances secretion of the glands rich in glycogen. Cervical mucus altered to thicker and viscid, preventing sperm penetration. And there are two more hormones secreted by the ovary. Those are inhibin and activin. They are more important in feedback loops for the regulation of the secretion of the FSH. So ovarian cycles. So there is in any menstrual cycle, it has to be coordinated with the ovarian cycle. So what happens in the ovarian cycle? There will be recruitment of group of follicles, and there will be selection of a single follicle to form dominant follicle. This dominant follicle has to mature into a Graafian follicle, and after the formation of Graafian follicle, there occurs ovulation. And after the ovulation, this Graafian follicle is converted into corpus luteum. And after the corpus luteum, if there occurs a pregnancy, the corpus luteum is maintained by the production of the HSG by the placenta of the fetus. If there is no pregnancy, because there is no progesterone or FSH, LH produced by HCG produced by the fetus, there will be demise of the corpus luteum. The corpus luteum becomes corpus albicans. So what is the structure of the Graafian follicle here? There will be, okay, this is theca externa. This layer is theca externa. This is theca interna. So this is thecal layer. And after the thecal layer, what we see here is the granulosa layer. And this is the antrum filled with the antral fluid. And this is your oocyte. This is your oocyte. And the oocyte is surrounded by the connective tissue like kind of thing, what we call it as zona pellucida. Around the ova also, there are some few cells. We call it as coronal radiata. So corpus luteum. What happens to the corpus luteum? It causes life cycle of the corpus luteum include proliferation, vascularization, maturation, and regression. So what is the stage of proliferation? So we come into main part of our menstrual cycle. Till now, we have discussed the ovarian part of the menstrual cycle. Now we are discussing the uterine part of the menstrual cycle. So what are the changes in the endometrium? It happens in 5 phases. There is menstrual endometrium, there is proliferative phase, there is secretory phase, and one secretory phase, if there is fertilization, there is preparation of the implantation, If there is no fertilization, there is phase of endometrial breakdown causing menstruation. So what happens in the uterus? It is mainly divided into deciduum functionalis and deciduum basalis. The basal layer, what we see here is deciduum basalis. This is deciduum functionalis. And again, it is again divided into intermediate and superficial. Intermediate is stratum spongiosum. The upper superficial layer is stratum compactum. So what happens in the basal zone? The basal zone is mainly supplied by the basal arteries, and it is the constant layer. The basal layer is not shed during the menstrual cycle. The basal layer is the constant layer, and it is uninfluenced by the hormone, and there are no cyclical changes which are observed. So after shedding superficial part during menstruation, the regeneration of the components occur from this zone. So under hormonal control, mainly with the estrogen and progesterone. So what happens to the proliferative phase? It is characterized by development of deciduum functionalis in preparation for implantation in response to the rising levels of estrogen. So in early proliferative phase, the endometrium is relatively thin. It is around 1 to 2 mm. So with the effect of the estrogen, there will be increased mitotic activity in the glands and the stroma, which causes pseudo-stratified pattern developing in the endometrium. So there will be increase in the endometrial thickness. It will become from 2 to 8 mm, from basalis to opposite basalis. So what happens in secretory phase? The glands become coiled and they are lined by simple columnar epithelium, and there will be glycogen present within the vacuoles, and there will be stromal edema in the secretory phase. So secretory phase, day 17, as I discussed earlier, glycogen accumulates in the basal portion. In day 18, these vacuoles will move to the apical portion, and then by day 19, we secrete glycoprotein and glucopolysaccharide, and day 21 to 24, the stroma becomes edematous, and day 23 to 28, the pre-decidual cells surrounding spiral arterioles will develop. So what happens? We have discussed both proliferative phase and secretory phase. Proliferative phase is under the influence of estrogen, and the secretory phase occurs after ovulation. It is under the influence of progesterone. So after the secretory phase, what happens? Now comes the menstrual phase. It is due to withdrawal of the steroids produced by the ovary. The estrogen and progesterone are withdrawn because the Graafian follicle, which has converted into the corpus luteum, will die. It will become corpus luteum, corpus albicans. So corpus albicans does not produce either estrogen or progesterone. So what happens? There will be sex steroids withdrawal, which leads to spiral artery vascular spasm. So artery becomes spastic, which leads to endometrial ischemia. This ischemia in turn leads to lysosomal breakdown, releasing proteolytic enzymes and promote local tissue destruction. So these what are the main vascular sequences which occur with shrinkage of the height and blood flow within the spiral vessels diminishes, venous drainage is decreased, which leads into vasodilation. The spiral arteries undergo rhythmic vasoconstriction and relaxation. Each successive spasm is more prolonged and profound, leading eventually to endometrial blanching, and there will be ischemia and stasis. So, what are the cervical changes? Because of this ischemia, the endometrium starts shedding. What happened to the cervical changes? The follicular phase, internal mass is funnel shaped, the mucus is thin and watery, stretchability increases to the beyond of 10 centimeters, and fern tree pattern is present. And like glandular epithelium is torn. What happens in the luteal phase? The internal os is tightly closed, the mucus is thick and viscid, and there is no stretchability. The fern tree pattern is absent. Glands are more branched. Vaginal cycle, follicular phase and luteal phase. So what happens in the cytology? There will be predominance of superficial large conified cells with pigmentic nuclei. In luteal phase, what happens? There is predominance of intermediate cells, what we call as navicular cells. There is presence of leukocytes and basocytes. Okay, thank you. This ends your menstrual cycle. Let me know if you have any doubts. I'll be here for 5 minutes. I'll try to clarify. You can type it in the chat if you have any doubts. Any doubts, Uma? Okay, no doubts. Then I'm going to leave now. Thank you.